what made you so passionate about telling this story during an election year? And let me just say that when they focused on you in the film, my heart bled for you because you were like, I just hate to see my brothers and sisters, fall prey to misinformation. So I wanted to tell you that before you answer the question.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Carla. Yeah, for me, it's a personal thing. I served for 7 years as a combat engineer officer in the Marine Corps, and I've seen the disproportionate number of veterans and folks who are in the military who've participated in things like the January 6th insurrection. We know it's a fact that veterans and active duty troops are being disproportionately targeted by these extremist groups because veterans have such respect and appeal across party lines in our society. And so that makes us incredible vectors for dis and misinformation. It also makes us really powerful messengers for ideological information, whether that's someone like Michael Flynn, who really inspired a lot of people to participate in the January 6th insurrection, or others. And so for me, it's personal. Like, I don't want to see people go down that path and then wind up in prison, or worse, harming someone, or harming our country's security. But also, in the film, you'll hear me talk about my own father, who now subscribes to conspiracy theories. And I think one of the things that makes me very hopeful about the film in particular is a couple of weeks ago, my dad and I sat down and we actually watched the film for the first time together. And I was incredibly nervous about how he was going to feel. I mean, of course, he had to give me permission up front to, use his picture and his name in the film, but which he did. But he actually really liked it. He thought it was a really interesting experiment in leadership, and he enjoyed kind of seeing behind the scenes of how decision makers make decisions. He obviously had a lot of criticisms about how they made their decisions, but I hope that can serve as an entry point for other families like mine.
Girl, you a brave one. Was your father in the service too?
No, he was not, which also is like makes it even more frustrating when he has like conspiracy theories about how the military works that he's telling me about. I'm like, okay,
That is hilarious because my father was in the Marine Corps. So Semper Fi, do or die, girl.
Semper Fi. I always feel the need to apologize to the children of Marines. I know how we can be.
You already know. But I seem to be doing okay.
You're doing great.
But I want to talk a little bit about Vet Voice and how you guys got together.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we're a national veterans advocacy organization. We represent about 1.5 million vets and military families nationwide. And our main goal is to help veterans have a voice in their communities and in our democracy. So that might mean, they get in touch with us because there's something happening at the local level they want to influence and they maybe want to learn how to organize. Or there's a big piece of federal legislation that impacts them and their families, and we bring them out to Washington, D.C., set them up with meetings, et cetera. And that that ranges across a variety of issues. Some of the issues we work on are traditional veterans issues like housing, homelessness, healthcare, but also things like reproductive healthcare, access to abortion. These are things that impact vets and military families every day, and our voices really matter in those conversations. But increasingly, over the last few years, we've been really concerned about the rise of extremism in society and the slide towards authoritarianism. And it's just in direct conflict with our values as those who have pledged an oath to the Constitution and really believe that everyone has the right to vote, has the right to participate in our democracy, and do so in a way that is free of political violence and threat. And so we wanted to do something that would address this growing issue from people who are, members of the veterans community, and to do it in a way that not only produced learnings that we could share with the government and share with Congress, but also gave everyday Americans a way into the conversation and a way to understand some of the things like the Insurrection Act that might be a little esoteric if you're not in this every day, but really have increasingly may have a very scary role in people's lives. We have a major presidential candidate with a platform, Project 2025, that encourages the president of the United States to use the Insurrection Act to send active duty military into politically opposing governors' states against their will, or use the active duty military to deport people who are potentially here illegally. That is a massive break from how our society has viewed civil military relations since the founding of this country. And it's very important that people understand what that is and how they can sort of have a conversation about it.
Thank you for breaking that down for me. You seem to be a perfect example of someone who went to battle for our country and came back and is still fighting for the country. And I can't say that about everybody, as I'm sure you can't, but it's nice to know that there are people like you and people that are like-minded like you that still have a passion about democracy and what the United States of America stands for. Having said that, I noticed that you have a little bit of a news background, and I just wanted to find out, what is it with that background? What is it that keeps bringing you back to putting our government on blast and trying to hold people accountable from a cinematic point of view? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like that's what you're doing. And I know that that's the biggest way to reach the masses, to get that story out there. But I was just interested to know, what your point of view was on that subject.
Yeah, well, I think democracy only works when you have engaged, active, motivated, fired up citizens. Otherwise, the government will either do nothing or they'll just do what the people who are there want to do. The whole point of democracy is that it's responsive to those of us who vote to bring people into those offices. And so, for me, this film does two things. One, it does expose some of the challenges that we face, and I think some of the weaknesses that our government has had in, for instance, building more checks and balances into the Insurrection Act, going after extremists in the military, and we know who we know are there today, making sure that neo-Nazis don't join the military to begin with, and really, really committing to a screening process. But also, I think it's very hopeful because throughout the film, you see people from both sides of the aisle coming together who might have very different political beliefs on a number of subjects, but are clearly very committed to ensuring the United States of America, our experiment in American democracy, continues for hundreds of years to come and gets better, not worse. And so I think that you don't often see that portrayed on film. You might see the action and the buildings being blown up in a movie like Civil War, but you don't see the people behind the scenes who are really genuinely, with humility, trying to solve tough problems in challenging dynamic environments with the best and often imperfect information that they have. And so I hope that people will see that and not just kind of tune out or become cynical about government, but will really see it as an invitation to become more involved, maybe even potentially to run for something themselves, because that really is what makes this country great. I think another thing that you see that audiences have brought up in our sort of post-screening conversations is how influenced or confused they are by sort of the information environment, the amount of disinformation on social media, the fact that there are media outlets that have an agenda versus another. This is a real world thing that we're living through right now. The use of AI to create deepfakes, which isn't even challenging. You even see the Red Cell at one point just whip up a video out of nowhere, and that gets in front of the president at one point. So we are living in a moment where every American isn't watching the 5 p.m. evening news on the same channel. I mean, we're watching news or ingesting news on different planets. And so we have to ensure that our government is nimble enough to be able to respond to that fractured media environment. And I think that's something that you saw them struggle with in the film, and our government will continue to struggle with as we kind of wrap our brains around this new situation we find ourselves in.
I think the way you've explained this is absolutely fantastic. And I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me about it today. As I'll say a fellow Marine, I'm not one, but my daddy is.
Absolutely, part of the family.
But you know what I mean? I really appreciate you taking the time, because when people see this and they listen to it, they will be a little more informed than they were before they tuned in. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Carla. I really appreciate it.